Hey, RetconRaider here, with special thanks to the Raiders, the fine folks who help make these videos possible, including but not limited to Revenant, Alois, Anerdinwarpaint, Dragon Matrix 7, Eerie V23, Exsellsior, Gottlieb, Kazorm, Lima, Nathan Welch Jr., Tomasz Piątkowski, Triphoppenskip, and Valinrook. Thanks for your support, guys. That said, let's get started. And welcome back to Werewolf the Apocalypse, Heart of the Forest, as we continue this tranquil tale of self-discovery. This has been a nice chill journey so far, very atmospheric, very relaxing for the most part. And I'm sure it'll stay that way. I mean, it's not like werewolves are known for their sudden outbursts of rage-fueled violence or anything. Let's proceed, shall we? The day was hot and beautiful, yet I couldn't stop thinking about the devastated grave. Village center, new friends, hidden tensions. A bird of many colors. "This is such a nice village," exclaimed Anya as we walked along the quiet street. Nothing moved. The heat was stifling. The village was really quaint. "It's quaint," I carefully admitted. "Is that a nice way of saying it's a shithole?" Bartek made a disgusted face and we burst out laughing. I was thirsty. Inappropriate. "Let's get something to drink," I proposed. "I'm parched." The local store was a large mini-mart with all kinds of goods, from beer and vegetables to notebooks and pens. There was a bench near the entrance, and on it were a few local drunks. I prepared myself for a confrontation, but nothing happened. They threw me an appraising glance, murmured something, and let us be. An obvious opportunity for trouble, but probably best avoided. "They're drunk and no threat," I said, assessing the situation. "We can always walk away, and if they try to stop us, all it'll take is a firm push, one or two kicks, and then we can make a run for it." "Why do you even plan for things like that?" Anya shook her head in disbelief. My stepdad sent me to a self-defense course when I was 12, I shrugged, to help me with my anger management issues. "Yeah, that makes sense." We spent some time inside, browsing the Latvian, Lithuanian, and Belarusian goods. Why was there almost nothing Polish here? And who in their right minds drinks coriander soda? I was putting the soda back on the shelf when we heard a commotion coming from outside. Some slurs, some curses, and a clear, mockingly polite, "I'm so sorry, darlings. I don't understand. Do you like my skirt?" "Ah, fuck," Bartek murmured under his breath. I looked outside. There was someone standing next to the drunkard's bench. They were definitely not local. The person was old. Not helpless granny old, but old, with deep wrinkles and a narrow mouth. They had the unisex grace of a tired, heroin-preserved rock man. Their shoulder-length, disheveled hair completed the look. You know what? That describes pretty much every lead singer from the 80s, and I am a huge fan of 80s bands, but, at the same time, I think we can all admit that that's probably pretty out of place for a small, backwoods, European village like this one. They looked like someone had teleported them there from a different planet. They had a clean shave, and eyes highlighted with eyeliner. Their nails were painted in bright blue. They wore heavy army boots, an outrageously red skirt, a tank top, and lots of leather jewelry. On their bag, there were pins, lots of pins. All kinds of LGBTQA plus flags, anarchist and pacifist symbols, and I think some German band stripes. You know what? We don't know who's really the aggressor here. the drunkards could be trying to cause trouble, or this person could be going out of their way to try to provoke a reaction, so until we know more, this might be a situation where we want to take a step back and see how things unfold. Besides, Mom would have told me to stay out of this. Don't get involved, my mother always told me. You keep getting into trouble. You don't want to get into trouble abroad when there's no one to help you. But that was the problem, wasn't it? I always managed to get involved. I couldn't just let it go, even now. Oh, well. Alright then. So much for the balanced approach. Also, I am unclear on what these options are. We have to pick a side to approach, but are we approaching them to try to talk them down, or to actively confront them? Because those are two very different things. Alright, well, we'll approach the drunks. With any luck, we can talk them down or diffuse whatever's about to happen here. I zeroed in on the drunkards. What do you think you're doing? I asked in Polish. This was a sentence I'd heard a lot as a child. Co ty wyprawiasz? They looked at me surprised. They didn't expect any intervention, and my appearance changed the dynamics of the scene. It was no longer a pack versus a lone stranger. Now it was a pack versus a pack. And who the hell are you? Asked the one who seemed to be the leader of the group. I yelled at them. Leave them alone, I yelled. He got up and the rest of the drunks followed him. I wouldn't hit a woman with a flower, but I ain't taking no shit from no tourist girl, so you better get the fuck out of here. I paused. I remembered that odd saying about the flower from my childhood, back when we lived with Dad. And I realized I remembered the but as well, and what came after it. Oh, that has negative connotations. So I punched him, I guess. Hey, Kaiser. Well, so much for avoiding trouble. Maya! Shouted Anya, shocked. But I didn't listen to her. This wasn't my first rodeo. I got into fights all the time. You know, somehow that does not surprise me. A lot of pieces are falling into place here. I watched my opponents. I kept my eyes on the opponents. They were angry and violent, and not very well trained. I easily evaded the first punch. The stranger in the red skirt also wasn't new to such situations. I could only admire the way they used their heavy army boots. Okay, I'd rather lose health than will, I think. The fight was brief and intense, and when we parted there were a few black eyes and bleeding noses on their side. My arm was bleeding, slashed by a broken bottle. I'd call it a draw. But before anything serious could happen, there was a piercing, irritated shout. It stopped us all in our tracks. "Hey!" someone said suddenly from behind our backs. The voice was loud and piercing, and there was something about it that made the men stop immediately. It made me pause as well, but the stranger in the red skirt seemed to stop out of politeness, not because of the sheer power of the voice. I turned around. The woman approaching us had the longest, thickest braids I'd ever seen, as thick as my arm. There was something faintly Asian about her facial features, and the men on the bench looked at her with deference. "What the fuck is going on here? Kim, are you insane? And you," she pointed her finger at the men, "you should stop drinking that moonshine. It makes you pick fights you can't win." She looked ferocious. And the drunks started explaining themselves. "But look at this Fizania," said one of them, gesturing towards us. "For the last fucking time. The name's Lisa." She pronounced it Lisa. "And this is my friend. You're to leave them alone, got it?" Her Polish sounded weird, more melodic, or maybe mellower, even when she cursed. The drunkards mumbled and went back to drinking. "Thanks, Lisa," Kim said in English. "You shouldn't have." "Oh, but I wanted to." Okay, so Lisa and Kim. How did she command so much respect? "Why did they listen to you?" I asked. She turned to me and shrugged with just a hint of a smile. "Oh, they have their reasons." She looked me up and down. "And who would you be?" "I'm Maya. I come from the U.S." "Oh, are you here to protest the logging?" She raised her eyebrows. "Or just a tourist?" Why were they logging in a national park? "Wait, isn't this place like a national park?" I asked. "Why are they logging here?" "You'd think they'd leave the oldest forest on the continent, the beating heart of it, alone, wouldn't you?" She looked at me with a grim expression. "There's illegal logging here," Anya chipped in. "Wood is money, and there's plenty of wood in this forest." Suddenly, a feeling rushed over me. You know what? We may have actually been able to avoid that fight if our rage wasn't maxed. I was hoping we could control it with will, but... Yeah, let's rein that back a little. Suddenly, I felt cold, despite the hot, sticky summer air. As though there were a wind from the forest that blew only for me, inside me, chilling my bones and blood. There was something sad and helpless about it, even though it felt all-powerful. A word appeared in my mind, a strange one that was neither Polish nor English. Harano. Lisa looked at me in the eyes and spat on the ground. "I'd eat those greedy bastards alive." I noticed Kim was watching me. I felt like I was being watched, and when I looked up, I saw Kim observing me with a curious expression. "We haven't been properly introduced," they said in a soft voice. They were hiding something, I assumed, because that's just how I was. I looked at them and realized they were much more than they first seemed. Under their colorful attire lurked something else. Something primal. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I asked. "I know you have strange dreams," they whispered. "I suspect the forest is reaching out to you." They leaned closer to me. "It runs in your blood." The words were like a punch to the gut. "Trust me, I know." Alright, guess we're burning Will? Gosh, man. Okay, yeah. Let's do that. "Who am I?" I asked quietly. "You see things as they are," they said, looking me in the eyes. "You'll figure it out." Suddenly, I felt confident. Hey, that's convenient. I wasn't making that up. There was something strange in my family history. And there were people who knew what was going on. Before I could ask more, Anya and Bartek approached, and Kim shook their head, silencing me. "Meet us tomorrow at the logging site." They blew me a kiss, put their arm around Lisa, and walked away. Okay, so I think we have just met our first two werewolves here. And given that this is an extended introduction to the werewolf setting, I think it's pretty safe to assume that Maya is also a werewolf, but doesn't know it yet. Oh, cool. We get to go to the third place, too. I wonder if we'll get to go to the forest after this. I kept looking over my shoulder, but no one was following us. But yeah, like I was Like I was kind of armchair psychoanalyzing last time around, Maya has definite rage issues. I mean, being a werewolf and not knowing it could definitely be part of that, but it does sound like Anya might have been on the money about Maya's father being abusive, which again would also make sense to a certain extent if he was also a werewolf. That was always a big part of the werewolf setting, that animalistic rage they have to constantly fight to keep in check. Though, of course, it also wouldn't help if her father was just a jerk. I mean, then you're a jerk with rage issues. Abandoned railway. Lost hopes. Strange dreams. Trainspotting. Bartek wants to show us the most picturesque spot in the area, said Anya. Maybe that's not the right word, he said, frowning. Well, it's not like it's that beautiful, but it has, you know, an atmosphere, a climate. Ambiance? Ambiance? Anya said it at the same moment as I, and we laughed. Ambiance. Bartek smiled, visibly relieved. I meant ambiance. We ended up on some abandoned tracks. Sure, yeah, I can see the appeal. It's a very unique aesthetic. You know, once upon a time, it's been a while, but I used to go visit the Carolinas. One of the things I did like to do was just kind of wander around out in the old woods, the old forests near the mountains, and take in the sights. And there were a lot of areas where you'd get that sort of unique blend of wilderness combined with the footprint of people who used to live there 50 or even 100 years ago. It's nice. We soon left the village behind and ended up on some abandoned railway tracks. So this is where the magic happened? I grinned, pointing at empty bottles and used condoms strewn along the tracks. But with a slow, winding river a stone's throw away and the long, drooping branches of the old trees shading the unused railway, the place really was picturesque. The bees buzzed around us, the birds sang like there was no tomorrow, and the fragrance of herbs hung thick in the air. My head was spinning. It all felt unreal. I wasn't sure if it was the heat or the smell of the herbs, but the whole scene seemed unreal. The river slid by to our left like a giant snake, bees zigzagged through the air and sank, and the trees watched us. Every nook and hollow in their trunks sheltered a prying eye. It was kind of scary. I think I need to sit down for a while, I said weakly. Have some water. Anya pushed a bottle into my hand. You're dehydrated. When we entered the dense copse, we noticed a woman standing among the trees. It was Lisa. Hello, Bartek, she said. How did she get there? How did you get here so fast? I couldn't help but ask. There are shortcuts. She didn't elaborate. Hello, Elizabeta Danilovna, answered Bartek. I could hear something in his voice. Was it fear, respect, anger? I couldn't place it. She smiled. Do you mind if I join you? She asked. I noticed Bartek getting tense. So what's the deal with you two? I asked Bartek. She's from around here, he shook his head, but she helps with the protests. You know, Lisa turned to me. The protests against the logging that his father so eagerly promotes. Bartek winced, and snapped, I guess. Sorry, shouldn't we coexist with the forest? That means taking what we need to survive, just as everything does. 6,000 trucks of wood isn't taking what you need, kid. He threw me a glance, looking for help. I like Bartek, but at the same time, this is supposed to be a nationally protected forest, right? Like, it would be illegal to log here at all, let alone 6,000 trucks worth. Sorry, Bartek. She does sound like she has a point. Don't look at me, Bartek. I think it's barbaric. I wasn't about to beat around the bush. Oh, that's harsher than I wanted it to be. If it was about local action, there wouldn't be a problem, Anya chimed in. But it isn't. Giant corporations are at work here with heavy machinery. Ask your friend about his father's money and his clients, Lisa shrugged. Bartek stormed away. I shrugged and followed him. Lisa followed me. Okay, well, yeah, I guess if it's not locals and it is giant corporations, it is less sympathetic. The path was too narrow for all of us to walk together, so at some point I found myself walking with Lisa. She would squat from time to time and collect some herbs. So, you're looking for your roots, she said after a while. Why? There were a lot of unanswered questions. I needed to know the whole story. There's a story here, and I need to hear it, I answered honestly. Sit down with me. She nestled among the roots of an old tree, reached into her basket, and took out a blunt. Let's have a smoke, and I'll tell you a story. She noticed when I hesitated. You need to hear it. I don't mind when other people indulge. As long as they're doing so responsibly and it's nothing too dangerous. I'm just not a fan of the idea of surrendering control, I guess, using something that artificially changes my mood or takes away my ability to think clearly. I will sit down, though. Tangled roots. Lisa let out a cloud of smoke and started talking. From what I learned from Bartek's grandma, you're asking the wrong questions about the wrong people. Wait, why shouldn't I be asking about my family? I was just asking about my family, I pointed out. But not the right branch of the family, she said. Your grandfather wasn't from this village. This is a tainted land, girl, she continued. So much blood was spilled that Pushcha almost lost her mind. Her? You are, anthropomorphizing this forest. Every word was gendered in Polish, but I was pretty sure that forest was male. Isn't forest a he? Oh, of course, Polish grammar. I am clearly a master of such things. I call her Pushcha because it's her proper name, she huffed. Las to Pushcha, what dog is to wolf. Domesticated, enslaved, used. Pushcha is the primeval forest, one untouched by humans. Primal, strong, and feared. There was admiration in her voice, and I realized that the word sounded like the rustle of leaves, like the wind. Pushcha. As I was telling you, Pushcha almost went mad. And it's not wise to wake those spirits, especially not now. What do you mean? I didn't understand. I need answers. She looked at me with those uncanny eyes. Her gaze was almost unbearable, hard, with anger smoldering deep within it, ready to jump at my throat. And then, suddenly, something changed. Lisa sighed heavily. You have no idea, do you? About what? What do you mean? I asked. So you have no idea who you are, she stated. Nobody told you what it was like here during the war and after it. Her eyes lost focus as though she was looking at something only she could see. In 1939, when the war broke out, first came the Germans, and then the Russians. You know, they actually worked together. Stalin never forgot that he was beaten by the Poles in 1920. She shot me a glance. Yeah, I'm not even going to pretend I'm familiar enough with any real-world conflicts to comment on them. I didn't really care, but I nodded politely. No, that is not accurate. As I just stated, I have no idea what she's talking about. Oh, you have no idea what I'm talking about. Yes, that, thank you. It doesn't matter, really. She took a drag. Anyway, many millions of lives later, Stalin and Hitler stopped working together, so to speak, and the Germans came, and then the Russians again, and then there were the forest soldiers. The forest part got my attention, but I listened, holding my breath. I was hanging on her every word. They started as Polish soldiers, but then the war ended and they became guerrillas to fight the Russian occupation, and then they ended up as desperate bandits, she sighed. For the people who lived here, they were all the same. Germans, Russians, forest soldiers. They killed, they maimed, they tortured and burned villages. Didn't matter what language they spoke. This is getting a little too real, but let's push on. She looked sad. I'm sorry, I touched her arm. I didn't know that it was also Tangled. My great-grandparents were from here, she sighed. After the war, there were some changes, and my whole family was sent to Siberia to die. My grandmother was the only one who survived. She met a Buryat shaman, and here I am. But your story is tangled with all of this. She looked straight at me. Have you ever wondered what your grandfather did during the war? Suddenly, I felt dizzy. I wanted to answer, but I couldn't think straight. The smoke from her joint smelled funny. The forest moss, strange herbs, and ash and blood. I tried to stay focused. I focused and understood that the strange feeling came from within. It was like a long-forgotten dream, like an ancient memory suddenly brought to life. I let it in. We were sitting around the fire, deep in the pushcha. They knew the rules and they decided to break them, I say, and the others nod their heads. We have to react, or they'll stop respecting us. There must be a law. Even in these cruel times, we need a law. It's the only thing that keeps us apart from animals. Tomorrow, we're going to burn a village. Wolves gather in the darkness, waiting for a feast. Then, the vision ends. That is ominous. When I came to my senses, Lisa was still looking at me. I ran over it in my head. If I understood what you're saying, I looked at her. Something from my family's past casts a shadow on my future? She shrugged. I've told you everything I know. If you want more, talk to my girlfriend. We'll be at the logging site tomorrow. Yeah. Good idea. And that evens us out again. That's good. I will, I said. Now I finally knew who and what to ask. There you are, Bartek waved to me. I thought I'd lost you. Yeah, well, that's because you stormed off like a petulant child when I disagreed with you. But, you know, I don't hold it against him. It turns out shit's complicated. The village. The bison statues were watching me with their creepy, painted eyes, as though they knew me. We called it a day and went back. I guess we don't get to go to the forest, so we did miss out on that. That's a bummer. The first evening. The B&B was quaint. I left Anya and Bartek outside. They looked like they needed some time alone to say their goodbyes. When I got out of the shower, Anya was back, smiling and a little flustered. "What a day," she smiled. "So what do you think?" I made a quick mental inventory of everything that had happened that day. Okay, I'm not sure if we get to cycle through all of these, or if we have to choose one or two. I'll try to prioritize it based on what I feel is most relevant to our selected goal. Something weird happened today when I talked with Lisa. I think it was her joint, but I saw some things. It looked like something from the past. Like from your past? For a second I searched for words to explain it to her, but I couldn't, really. I think it was my grandpa. It's hard to say, but it sure was weird. I shrugged, ending the topic. I mentioned the graveyard. What happened here that people are still vandalizing my family's grave? What did my grandfather do? She put a hand on my shoulder. Whatever it was, it's not your fault. It wasn't, but it could be my responsibility. I remembered the scene at the shop. Remember the shop? The tension seemed almost unnatural. I didn't think people in Poland normally picked fights so easily. Maybe they just envied Kim's style, Anya tried to joke. But she seemed worried. They were cutting down the forest. I can't believe they're logging here. I shook my head. Isn't the forest on a UNESCO list or something? Yeah, I know. I want to check out this protest people were talking about. Maybe we could go there tomorrow? I didn't feel like talking anymore. You know what? I'm seriously tired. Let's call it a day, shall we? Soon we were both in our beds, ready to sleep. I lay in my bed for some time trying to make some sense out of everything that I'd learned and experienced that day. The gibbous moon was shining through the window. A gentle wind was blowing. When I closed my eyes, I could still see the weird vision I had that day. My roots were here. I could feel them, almost touch them. And they were reaching to me. I felt I was closer to getting my answers. Nice, nice. I felt that the answers I was looking for were within my reach. I just had to go and see the logging protest, meet the right people, and make them talk. After a long while, all these thoughts became blurry. They slowly started to turn into pictures, sounds, and colors. I drifted off. A night in the woods. The railroad tracks remember times of their glory. The trees around them whisper about forgotten secrets. My senses are heightened. I see the moon cutting the sky in half. I am a cub. Yes. I am a wolf cub like the ones my grandfather told me about. I will grow and my fangs will become sharper. I will taste blood. I feel a pull and I surrender to it. I run toward a clearing. There are piles of fresh corpses of people who died too young, skinned and mutilated. Their loved ones stand around them, grieving, unable to do anything, waiting. And suddenly they are just trees and tree trunks. I look around. My nostrils flare. Who did it? Who murdered the trees? There is a stench in the air like meat rotting in acid. But somehow worse. I see the monstrous army. Their mandibles are whirring chainsaws. Their long metal arms are wrapped with black pipes that look like glistening intestines. Their smell is vile. They wait, unmoving. I charge at them. I try to breathe through my mouth as I run toward the machines. I hit and kick them blindly, screaming at the top of my lungs. And in my own screams, I hear strange whispers. They tell me to look at the sky. There, between the stars, two shapes circle each other. An old, sad wolf with gray hair and a white weasel. They keep their eyes on one another as they continue their dance. Suspicious, but not hostile. We need to fight the enemy, the awful, rotting stench. I know that much. But how can we do that when we don't trust each other? They stop. They look at me and the clearing. Oh, we have an analytical choice here. Interesting. Okay, so we are starting to lean into what I imagine will be our future role? I don't remember any of the terminology. I reprimand them. Stop it! You've wasted enough time! Once again, I don't recognize the words, but I understand. They come down to me, and their voice is the voice of the Pushcha. Welcome back. You've been away for too long a time. I wake up. Oh, and Chapter 2. Which, you know what, I guess makes this a good place to call it. A slightly shorter episode, but I mean, a chapter break would be the most logical place to pause. Man, things got pretty trippy this time out, but I think that's just Werewolf. As I recall, it is a very metaphysical game, I guess. Spirits and everything, a constant hidden war waged between magical forces that normal people can't perceive, but that werewolves can. Everything is anthropomorphized. I think werewolves are supposed to be like the protectors of Gaia, the manifestation of nature. But then there's also like the manifestation of technology, which grew alongside Gaia, but has become corrupt over time. I mean, obviously we're seeing some pretty clear symbolism in these dream sequences. The idea that the trees of the forest are innocent victims, skinned and dismembered by the minions of like anthropomorphized commercialism. The logging machines are portrayed as monsters, with teeth like chainsaws and black, throbbing veins. So, you know, not exactly the most subtle imagery, but that, again, was just Werewolf. It was always a game about trying to protect nature against the corrupt influences of technology or civilization run amok. A little on the blunt side, but still fascinating. I am enjoying this. We'll hit the pause button for now, but we will certainly pick up here next time as we push into Chapter 2. There's a lot to unpack here. See you then. Oh, and remember, although I do love playing Werewolf the Apocalypse, Heart of the Forest, you can find out more about the game by visiting the official website, the official social media feeds, or the official store pages. And if you'd like to help support the channel, then feel free to push the buttons that do the things, or maybe even check out the Patreon. Links are in the description.